Hi, I'm with Ray Norton, the manager of the Enyo framework team. And many of you were at the Enyo party last night, which was definitely a happening party. And now know Enyo as a blue drink that definitely get happy after drinking one of those. However, there's more to Enyo than that awesome drink. So, Ray, what is Enyo?
Yes, besides being a delicious but deadly blue drink, Enyo is an application framework. And specifically, it's a framework that lets developers build native quality, cross-platform apps purely in HTML5. And we emphasize native quality and we emphasize cross-platform, and it's worth sort of unpacking both of those two statements. So Enyo, for those of you who don't know, evolved actually out of Palm's WebOS. And as many of you probably do know, WebOS was really the first mobile operating system to adopt the web stack as its native app runtime. So all of the apps that shipped with WebOS, from the phone app to the calendar and contacts and you name it, were all built using Enyo and its predecessors, basically. So we were approaching the web application space from maybe a different place than a lot of other frameworks, in that from day one, the bar we had to clear was providing a user experience, even on a fairly constrained computing environment like a mobile device, that rivals the native app experiences on platforms like iOS and Android. So, WebOS has gone through many twists and turns in the last couple of years, and it has a future ahead of it. But over the last many months, while we were sort of figuring out where to go next with WebOS, we sort of turned to a strategy that we'd had on the back burner for Enyo for a long time, which was to take everything we learned about creating native quality apps using HTML5 and make that available for cross-platform development. So you can build an app using Enyo that you deploy on iOS, Android, BlackBerry, on desktop browsers, back as far as IE8, Safari, Chrome. So the idea is build a native quality user experience using pure HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and a lot of the hardest problems that are part of tackling that are sort of baked into Enyo as a result of everything we learned with WebOS.
Well, it's got to have some chops, because it's a challenge there.
Yep.
I've seen some things working on IE9 now, when they built libraries on it, but IE9 has a lot more of the things.
Yes, we like IE9 a lot better than IE8, but IE8 is still has a significant footprint in the enterprise, and one of the things that we're explicitly trying to do is enable businesses to build apps that let them reach their customers and their employees across all different types of devices, and unfortunately on some of those devices there is IE8. So obviously, we make the most of whatever browser runtime we're running in, and so you're going to have a much better experience on a more modern browser, but we sort of drew a hard line and said, we've got to make this at least work in IE8.
Well, that definitely means it has some chops. Given all that experience and that you've been doing it a while and you didn't just jump on the bandwagon lately, what's your opinion on the readiness of HTML5 for prime time when it comes to building mobile apps?
Yeah, obviously I have a bit of a biased perspective, but I think we can point to what we did with WebOS, and although it hasn't achieved the type of market success that we hoped and imagined it might, the user experience of WebOS was fairly generally praised, and we have a huge rabid base of WebOS devotees who are still begging us to to give them new WebOS phones and tablets. And so I think that's a testament to the readiness of HTML5 to build native quality app experiences. And so it's certainly easier to squeeze every last drop out of performance using a native SDK for one of the mobile platforms, but that doesn't at all mean that you can't build a great app experience that runs across platforms, even on mobile devices, with HTML5.
Speaking of which, then what are some of the hardest problems that you run into when you are trying to build a native type experience? I mean, we are seeing a pretty good mass adoption of lighter apps that don't have to be real performant and get into the hardest areas. But you're talking about the harder now, technically. So
Exactly. There are some areas that are notoriously difficult, and the first one actually you come across even before you start worrying necessarily about performance. And really the fact is that JavaScript and HTML and CSS, they're awesome technologies, but they've really evolved from a web which was really content-centric, not application-centric. And as a result, the web's native languages, if you will, don't do a whole lot to help you organize application code. So an application may have tons and tons of lines of code, and if you're not really careful or a real expert, it's pretty easy to find yourself with a tangled mess of code. So one of the things that Enyo tries to do is provide a really simple, elegant object inheritance model and component model, which gives you an easy way to build modular, encapsulated, reusable code that's easier to reuse across projects and even maintain within a single app. So that's, I would say, hard problem number one that Enyo tries to help you solve. Beyond that, you definitely run into performance, next. And there's, for basic layouts and basic graphics and text, obviously the web stack is perfectly adequate. But as you're starting to get into more interactive widgets and more interactive sort of navigation schemes with things sliding and moving all over the screen, in order to make those things performant in HTML5, you need to pull out all the stops, and you need to understand exactly what about JavaScript costs the most in terms of performance, and in what cases using accelerated CSS is going to be necessary. And unfortunately, in that last example, the answer can actually vary from platform to platform. So, we've spent a lot of time on all the platforms that we support with Enyo, really trying to answer those questions in a way that we can, bake the solutions into widgets that are reusable. One of the hardest things, for sure, is scrolling in lists. And so that one thing alone has been enough to convince a lot of people who've tried HTML5 for apps that it just can't be done. And so we've spent an inordinate amount of time coming up with a scrolling solution that employs the best possible implementation on each platform, whether it be using the platform's native scrolling or a combination of JavaScript and accelerated CSS, and paired that with an infinite list solution that lets you, scroll through a list of literally hundreds of thousands of items without bringing the device to its knees.
Sweet. Are you using, because so a lot of the cross-platform tools, or some of the better ones at least, and are using, taking advantage of OpenGL underneath or something like that? So
Enyo right now is operating sort of entirely within the web runtime. So you certainly have some cross-platform solutions that are sort of mixing native controls or sort of windows which they're turning over to OpenGL. Enyo's not employing that technique right now. So,
okay, so you're really going pure?
We're going pure web. It's, we're nothing but HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And that's really to meet our goal of running on, IE8, iOS, and everything in between.
Yeah.
We needed to take that approach. And frankly, we think
you have the technical chops to do it. I think a lot of people will run right into that.
Yeah, the technical chops, and I would say the persistence, and and the mandate to do it. Back in the WebOS days, we made a bet early on our technology stack, and we needed to deliver an experience that worked on that. So we had a lot of incentive to solve some of those problems.
And how do you think that Enyo, speaking of that, how do you think Enyo compares to some of the popular HTML5 App Frameworks? I mean, maybe we sort of half answer some of those.
Yeah,
they're not pure.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think you've gotten a feel for sort of where we're coming from. It probably does help to put Enyo in context, because the framework and library landscape is definitely complicated. And so you do have solutions like Appcelerator Titanium, which are mixing native code with JavaScript and HTML. And so we're certainly not doing that. We've made that clear. We're running purely within the web runtime. And then in the pure JavaScript space, you have lots of frameworks, libraries, micro frameworks, that are all sort of trying to solve different problems. I think if you look at something like jQuery and it's really the jQuery family of libraries, the best way to draw a distinction between jQuery and Enyo is that really all of the jQuery solutions are built on the principle of progressive enhancement, and the notion that your DOM is coming to you from either static markup or it's from the server, and then you're attaching sort of behavior to that. You're selecting parts of your DOM and building sort of styling and behavior on top of that. Whereas Enyo takes the approach of it's more JavaScript centric, and so an Enyo application, yes, exactly. So an Enyo application, most of your code is written in JavaScript. You can certainly fold in some HTML-based templating in certain circumstances, but by and large, you're working in JavaScript, and the Enyo application is responsible for really rendering all of itself into the DOM, as opposed to taking existing DOM and sort of attaching behavior on top of it. So a typical Enyo app will take sort of the whole browser window, or you can actually have an Enyo app render itself into part of an existing page as well. It plays nicely with other frameworks, but it is responsible for managing its own DOM, which is a distinction between Enyo and jQuery, for example.
So how would you monetize this beautiful library you're giving us? Because in some ways I want to see some monetization for you, because that usually means that things can continue and you get support.
So we're actually in the very fortunate position on the Enyo team of being a key enabler for a number of lines of business, both within the former WebOS group. So the assets of WebOS include a full stack OS and some cloud services, and we have plans going forward for monetizing a business around both of those things, but Enyo is really a necessary enabler for those. We also, as part of Hewlett-Packard, HP has a huge enterprise services team that sells solutions of all different kinds to enterprises, large and small, mostly large. And Enyo is being viewed increasingly by that group as a way for them to differentiate and provide more value to their customers. And so, as the Enyo team, we don't have a mandate to make money directly, and frankly that's a good thing, because it's been proven over and over again that making money in sort of the tools and framework space is difficult. I mean, that it's the companies that have succeeded in doing that are few and far between. So I feel very fortunate to be in a position where we're able to make our solution completely free and open source.
Great. That sounds good for us. So, Gray, how does Enyo relate to WebOS?
Yeah, so I've explained already how Enyo evolved out of WebOS. I think it's good to know now, though, that WebOS and Enyo are really best viewed as very loosely coupled sister projects. So
you don't have to have one?
No. So Enyo, developers today are building Enyo apps and deploying them, again, to Android, iOS, BlackBerry, the Chrome Web Store, serving them from web servers, with that WebOS completely out of the picture. At the same time, you could build an app for WebOS using no framework, using an alternative framework of your choice, or using Enyo. And of course, historically, the vast majority of apps for WebOS have been written using Enyo, and certainly within our company, the apps that we build going forward are going to be built using Enyo. But again, we really, our vision is one in which the web is sort of a universal platform for apps, and we'd love for people to use Enyo if it solves problems for them, but we're not dogmatic about that, because there's a lot of other great frameworks out there as well.
Well, it also sounds like if somebody's not on WebOS or whatever, Enyo can still be of great use there, as people are looking for really good, robust cross-platform tools, not ones that were just created on the fly and done as a label. How long have you been working on Enyo? Has that taken literally almost years, would you say?
Yeah, there's definitely years of work behind Enyo. So the team that built Enyo had been working in a similar problem space for upwards of a decade.
Right. It was considered a very good technical team.
Yeah, and then the Enyo itself, the first version of Enyo, was built as part of WebOS 3.0, and that so that dates back essentially 1.5 to 2 years at least, and then Enyo 2, which is really the first version of Go cross-platform, we've been working on since late last year. So while Enyo 2 is relatively young, there's literally years of experience that went into
built
building
on the
it.
technology and WebOS. Now, as far as other products out there that are in a similar space to Enyo, would you say Sencha?
Absolutely. So I would say that Sencha is, in many ways, probably the closest comparison to Enyo in that, effectively we're both providing a full app framework, which is really helping you do object-oriented JavaScript development, which results in highly reusable, maintainable code. There's some important differences, and part of it has to do with our legacy. Again, Sencha definitely has a great touch framework, Sencha Touch, which they've developed, but they were starting really with XJS and more of a desktop and enterprise focus, whereas we're coming from more of a mobile and consumer point of view, and I think that difference is reflected a little bit in our frameworks and where they stand. The other things to note are that whereas Sencha does right now still have two frameworks, one for touch devices and particularly WebKit-based touch devices, and one for desktop apps, we have one framework, and we're trying to enable you to write an app and deploy it across both desktop and mobile using the same framework, and we're running on all types of browser engines on the touch side, not just WebKit.
Which is theoretically, definitely a nicer scenario for us developers and designers.
Yeah. The other thing too is that while Sencha is available under the GPL license, and there's also a free commercial license, in many cases, developers will end up sort of running into limitations of those licenses that necessitate paying for Sencha in one way or the other. Whereas, again, because of the fortunate position we're in within our business unit, we're Apache 2 licensed, completely free and open source. There's no commercial licensing for Enyo at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, because there is a difference between GPL.
Yeah.
The game industry will run into that. I don't want to bore people on camera with that, but they should look into it.
Yeah.
Okay, and just one last question, and I know I'm a little too interested in this, but now that we've talked about Sencha a bit, and I do agree, having talked to some of those guys, they're very focused on the enterprise much more so than I think the mobile and the consumer. Although I would say that HP has a lot of experience in that market, should you care to bring it to bear eventually.
No, and it's true. We care about the enterprise too. Definitely, Palm was very consumer focused, but a big part of Enyo's future is definitely going to be addressing that enterprise market.
How do you think that there's kind of a third flavor in there that coming from the game side we're very familiar with, which is Adobe, and how do you see them fitting in there?
Yeah, I think Adobe has entered a phase of their life in which they're really doing a lot of great things to promote the web stack now, and certainly, PhoneGap, we love PhoneGap. So a huge proportion of Enyo developers are deploying Enyo apps to various platforms using PhoneGap, and we're good friends with the PhoneGap guys from Adobe days. And they're doing all kinds of exciting things. I sat in on the talk here about brackets, and that looks very interesting. So yeah, we think that in many ways our interests and Adobe's are very strategically aligned, and I think you'll see us working with them in a lot of ways.
Great. Well, it sounds like a good time to be a developer. Great. And Gray, from your point of view, what's next for Enyo?
Yeah, we've got a lot of exciting stuff in the works, actually. We're going to be releasing Enyo 2.1 next week, which includes some great new work around UI theming. So we have a few different ways in which you'll be able to customize the UI of our Onyx widget library, as well as globalization. So we did a lot of work in the WebOS days for making our apps localizable, and so we're releasing that into the Enyo 2 universe next week. And then beyond that, Enyo historically has been very opinionated around writing modular, encapsulated, component-based code, but to date it has not been very opinionated around the relationship of your application data and your app model with your UI. So there's a lot of frameworks that are very opinionated around MVC or similar patterns. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about how we could combine all the advantages of Enyo's component-based architecture with some of the advantages that have been well proven around MVC. And so an upcoming release later this year will introduce what we think is going to be a really effective MVC pattern into Enyo as well.
Oh, sweet. forward to that.